Let's talk about a hard truth today. Money is powerful, but it is not the ultimate power. Because here's the reality, even the richest men get cheated on. Even the wealthiest are left drained, not just emotionally, but financially, mentally, and spiritually. Why? Because money can buy attention, but it can't buy discernment. Luxury can attract people, but it can't attract loyalty. And when a man builds his entire identity around his bank account, he forgets the real currency: value. Let's break this down. A man may have a mansion, a yacht, a 7-figure portfolio, but if he lacks self-respect, boundaries, and emotional strength, he becomes a target, not a treasure. He thinks money is the solution to everything, so he starts leading with it. He buys her gifts instead of knowing her heart. He offers her status but never questions her intentions, and when the mask falls off, he's not just shocked. Because here's the harsh truth. A woman who is only loyal to your lifestyle will leave you the moment it crumbles. She didn't love the man, she loved the image. And if you built your identity on impressing, not leading, on spending, not standing firm, you were never in control to begin with. Real power isn't in what you own, it's in what you protect. You protect your peace, you protect your values, you protect your future by choosing women who align with your purpose, not your possessions. Men get destroyed not because they're rich, but because they're blind. They ignore red flags, they choose beauty over character, they choose chaos over peace as long as it comes wrapped in validation. But let me tell you something powerful. A man who knows his worth, who guards his mind, and who leads with wisdom cannot be manipulated. Not by money, not by emotion, not by lust. He doesn't just attract a woman, he attracts the right woman. One who values vision over vanity, loyalty over luxury. So if you're watching this and you've been broken, betrayed, or blindsided, let this be your wake-up call. Not to hate, not to blame, but to grow. Fix your values before you fix your wardrobe. Train your discernment before you train your body. And understand this, a rich man with no self-awareness is a rich target, but a wise man, he's untouchable because he knows what to let in and what to walk away from. Your future isn't in your income, it's in your integrity. Remember that money attracts attention, but it does not attract loyalty. This is one of the most misunderstood truths in modern relationships, especially for men who build their self-worth around wealth. When a man becomes successful, gains status, and builds financial power, it changes the way people see him, but it doesn't necessarily change the kind of people he attracts. In fact, it often magnifies the illusion of love, admiration, and connection. But deep underneath that admiration is a question that very few people dare to ask. Is she with him for who he is or for what he can give her? This is where everything begins to break. Because when you lead with your money, you train people to see you as a resource, not as a man. You teach them that your value comes from your possessions, not your principles. You think you're showing power by spending, gifting, and giving access to a luxurious lifestyle, but in reality, you're giving away control. You are no longer being loved for your essence, but for your image. And when the money fades, or when the excitement of luxury wears off, so does the connection. Because it was never rooted in loyalty, it was rooted in the benefits. We see this time and time again. Men who have everything on paper, the cars, the mansion, the business, the lifestyle, but emotionally, they're empty. Spiritually, they're disconnected. Because deep inside, they know something is off. They don't feel safe. They don't feel truly chosen. They know that if they lost everything tomorrow, the woman lying next to them would not stay. Not out of hatred, but because there was never any depth to begin with. The foundation was built on attraction, not alignment. Money can get you a date, but it can't build a relationship. It can open doors, but it can't guarantee respect. And here's the painful truth most men avoid. If your money is the loudest thing about you, it will drown out your character. If all she ever talks about is what you bought her, where you took her, or what you provide, you are not her man, you are her lifestyle. And that distinction matters because when a woman falls in love with the lifestyle, she doesn't stay when life gets real. She doesn't fight with you in the fire. She leaves the moment the shine fades or when someone else offers her more. This is how even powerful men get used. They think they're choosing the woman, but in reality, they're being chosen for what they can offer, not for who they are. They confuse attraction for commitment. They confuse excitement for emotional safety. But loyalty is not measured by how much fun you have in your highs. It's tested by who stands beside you in your lows. And if you've never seen her support you through pain, discomfort, or loss, you haven't seen loyalty, you've seen convenience. When a man builds a relationship on the foundation of money, he skips the most important question: would she stay if I had nothing? It's uncomfortable. It's even scary to ask. But if you don't ask it, life will. Because the truth always reveals itself, usually in moments of loss, failure, or challenge. And it is in those moments that a woman's heart is exposed. Some women love power, but they don't love the man behind it. And once the power is gone, they vanish because they weren't emotionally invested. They were strategically attached. This is not bitterness. This is not an attack on women. This is reality. Not all women are the same. But every man must learn to discern the difference between a woman who is impressed by your wealth and a woman who is drawn to your soul. One praises your success, the other prays for your peace. One takes advantage of what you've built, the other helps you protect it. One drains you, the other grounds you. Loyalty is quiet. It doesn't show up in the Instagram stories or in the designer bags. It shows up in how she supports your vision, in how she speaks about you when you're not in the room, in how she stands by your side when things go wrong. A woman who is loyal to your soul won't walk away when the lifestyle shifts. She stays because she never signed up for the image, she signed up for the man. But to attract that kind of woman, you have to stop leading with money. You have to lead with values, with honesty, with vision. You have to ask deeper questions, look past the surface, and recognize the red flags hiding behind the admiration. A woman who rushes intimacy, who constantly talks about your status, who compares you to other men, she's not looking for partnership. She's looking for power by association. Men who rely on money to create relationships often forget that real connection comes from emotional depth. It comes from shared values, spiritual alignment, mutual respect, not from how expensive the vacation was or how big the diamond is. Those things fade. What doesn't fade is how she treats you when you're struggling. What doesn't fade is whether she believes in your mission or just your money. Here's the truth. A man who does not know his worth will try to prove it with wealth. He will overcompensate with gifts, lifestyle, and access, but it never fills the void because deep down he knows he's not being loved fully. That's why so many successful men suffer in silence. They have everything, but still feel alone. Because it's not about what you can afford, it's about what your heart truly desires. And no amount of money can buy genuine loyalty. It's earned through presence, consistency, and trust. If you've ever been in a relationship where you felt like a wallet more than a man, understand this. You weren't chosen for your heart. You were chosen for what you represent. That doesn't make you weak, it makes you human. But now is the time to wake up, to grow, to stop defining your value by your possessions and start defining it by your principles. Because when you lead with integrity, you filter out manipulation. When you live with boundaries, you protect your peace. It's not about rejecting women, it's about choosing wisely. It's about observing her patterns, not just her words. Does she add peace to your life or pressure? Is she drawn to your mission or only your lifestyle? When you stop trying to impress and start trying to understand, everything changes. At the end of the day, money should be a tool, not your identity. It should support love, not substitute it. Because the right woman doesn't need to be bought. She needs to be seen, heard, and respected. And she'll return that respect tenfold when she knows your values align. So ask yourself, who are you without the money? What do you stand for when the gifts are gone? And most importantly, is the person by your side in love with your spirit or your success? That answer will either bring peace or pain, but it will bring the truth. And the truth will always protect you more than any amount of wealth ever could. A lack of self-awareness makes you a target. It doesn't matter how much you've achieved, how much you earn, or how influential you've become. If you do not understand who you are, what drives you, and what you truly need in a relationship, you will always fall into the hands of the wrong person. And the most dangerous part is, you won't even see it coming. You'll think it's love, you'll think it's admiration, but in reality, you're being studied, mirrored, and manipulated. People who lack self-awareness walk around with emotional blind spots. They don't understand their own trauma. They haven't healed from their past. They don't know what triggers them, what patterns they repeat, or what energy they attract. They confuse attention with affection. They confuse validation with connection. And that confusion is what leads to destruction, not just emotionally, but financially, spiritually, and mentally. A man who lacks self-awareness often overcompensates. He tries to impress, perform, and prove his worth through things that don't actually define him. He thinks if he shows up with money, with gifts, with status, that will secure love. But he doesn't realize that what he's really doing is advertising his insecurities. He's trying to buy what he hasn't built within himself, value. And when a manipulative woman sees that, she doesn't love him. She studies him. She reads his weaknesses like an open book. She sees that he lacks emotional maturity. She sees that his boundaries are weak. And instead of building with him, she builds a plan to use him. Because a man who does not know who he is will believe anything a woman tells him. If she tells him he's powerful, he believes it. If she tells him she loves him, he believes it, without ever questioning if her actions match her words. He doesn't observe. He doesn't verify, he just accepts. And that blind acceptance is what leads him into emotional traps. He becomes a people pleaser, constantly trying to make her happy, constantly afraid of losing her. Not because she's irreplaceable, but because he's dependent on her approval, her presence, her validation. He ties his identity to her attention. And when you give someone that much power over your sense of self, you're no longer in a relationship, you're in emotional captivity. Self-awareness is the armor that protects you from manipulation. It gives you the ability to see things for what they are, not what you want them to be. When you know yourself, you recognize red flags early. You don't ignore them. You don't romanticize toxicity. You don't fall for flattery. You stay grounded in truth. And the truth is, a relationship cannot be healthy if you are not whole. If you're wounded, you will choose from your wounds. If you're insecure, you will settle for whoever gives you attention. And if you're desperate for love, you'll call anything love, even control, even chaos, even emotional abuse. A lack of self-awareness also leads men to repeat the same patterns. They date the same type of woman, fall into the same toxic cycles, and wonder why nothing ever changes. But how can anything change if you don't change your level of consciousness? How can you expect different results when you don't even know why you keep choosing what hurts you? This is why healing is not optional, it's necessary. If you don't heal, you will always seek relationships to fill a void. You will expect your partner to fix what you haven't faced. And that pressure is what breaks even the best of connections, because no one can complete you, they can only complement you. But if you don't know who you are, what's there to complement? When a man lacks self-awareness, he's also easily influenced. He becomes whoever the woman wants him to be. He shifts his values to avoid conflict. He sacrifices his peace just to keep her around. He stops leading and starts submitting, not in love, but in fear. Fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, fear of being alone. But a man who is afraid to be alone will always end up with someone who makes him feel even lonelier. You must understand this. Emotional clarity is strength. Knowing yourself, your limits, your goals, your spiritual beliefs, your emotional needs. That's what separates a grounded man from a lost one. A man who knows himself doesn't get distracted by a pretty face or seductive words. He looks deeper. He listens to his gut. He asks the hard questions. He doesn't move out of desperation. He leads with purpose. A woman cannot respect a man who has no center. She may entertain him, she may even be with him for a while, but she will never feel truly safe under his leadership, because deep down she knows he's not leading from conviction. He's reacting from emotion. And that kind of man can be easily swayed, manipulated, or broken. Manipulative women thrive on men who lack self-awareness. It's easy to confuse them, easy to guilt trip them, easy to trap them in emotionally codependent dynamics. Because these men want love so badly, They overlook every warning sign. They give too much too fast. They don't think logically, they think emotionally. And emotional thinking, when not anchored in truth, is dangerous. There's nothing wrong with wanting love. There's nothing wrong with being successful and wanting to share your life with someone. But if you don't know who you are, what your boundaries are, and what kind of energy you allow into your space, you'll always be at risk. Not because women are dangerous, but because you are unaware. And unawareness is the real enemy here. A woman who respects herself and values your character will not be impressed by how much you can spend. She'll be impressed by how much you know yourself. She'll be drawn to your emotional intelligence, to your ability to stay calm under pressure, to your discipline, your boundaries, your spiritual grounding. That's what creates lasting respect. That's what builds loyalty. But it starts with you. You must become the kind of man who no longer chases love, but attracts it by who he is. A man who knows his purpose. A man who doesn't fear solitude because he's learned how to enjoy his own company. A man who can say no. A man who can walk away. A man who isn't driven by impulse, but by clarity. Self-awareness is the foundation of a powerful life. It protects your peace. It sharpens your discernment. It keeps you grounded when everything else is loud and tempting. It tells you when something isn't right, even when your emotions try to lie. And it teaches you to observe, not just feel. So many men are destroyed, not because they weren't successful, but because they were disconnected from themselves. They didn't see the manipulation because they didn't know their own worth. They tolerated emotional abuse because they hadn't faced their own wounds. They stayed in toxic relationships because they were afraid of confronting their loneliness. This is why you must do the inner work. Journal, reflect, pray, seek wisdom, talk to mentors, go back and revisit the moments that shaped your fears. Heal from the pain that keeps you choosing dysfunction. Forgive yourself for what you allowed in the past. And rise up as a man who is no longer controlled by confusion, because when you become self-awareness, you become dangerous in the best way. Not because you hurt others, but because you can no longer be easily hurt. You see manipulation from a distance. You sense misalignment in energy. You hear what's not being said. You trust your intuition. And most importantly, you love yourself enough to walk away from anything that doesn't honor your peace. You are not a victim, you are not helpless, but if you want to stop being a target, you must wake up to who you really are. Not what the world says, not what your status says, but who you are in truth, in character, in spirit. That's where your real power lives. And when you operate from that place, no one can use you because you finally see yourself clearly. And that clarity is what keeps you free.